You ready, Mike? You ready, Krista?
Yes.
Mindy? Mindy?
Take a picture of her.
Of cancer is
What are we streaming?
Netflix from last night. Ready? Welcome. It is December 14th, 2023. It is now 7:07. We are opening the Planning Commission for Kaysville City. I am Commissioner Lyon, and we have a quorum tonight. We have a pretty full agenda. We do have, I will note that we have 2 public hearings tonight, and I want to go over quickly the rules for public hearings. That is your time to talk. You'll have 3 minutes for each person to talk to that item. We will not be answering questions during that time. Anything that you bring up, we will answer after. And then as for the applicant will be able to speak after that we go through the public hearing on the 2 items. That's items 6 and item 7. And I will move on to item number 2, approval of the minutes for the November 9th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Have the commissioners had time to read those, and do we have an approval? Motion for approval?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, I have a motion and a second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. So let's just do a vote all at once. All in favor? Aye. Okay. So next up is we have oath of office for a new Planning Commission member, Megan Sevy. And I'll turn the time over to staff.
All right, here we go. So I will just, I'll read and then you just repeat. Okay. All right? Yes. Okay. I, Megan Sevy, having been appointed to the office of Kaysville City Planning Commission member,
as Kaysville City Planning Commission member,
do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support,
that I will support,
obey,
obey,
and defend the Constitution
and defend the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of Utah.
of the State of Utah,
And I will discharge
and I will discharge
the duties of my office
the duties of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I'll have you sign right here. And then
Okay,
And we will congratulate you and invite you to come sit up there.
thank you.
So next item is election for a new vice chair for the Planning Commission. So sadly, Krista is going to be going as a part-time,
Yes.
and we need to elect a new vice chair. Do we have any nominations?
I'll nominate Deborah Shepard.
Okay, we have a nomination. Do we have a second?
Who was it?
Deborah?
Deborah? I'd second it.
Okay, we have a, we have a,
Show up, anything can
we have a nomination second. Mike, we'll start with,
Next 30 minutes, she's probably the one viewer we've got.
exactly. Commissioner Packer, we'll start with you.
Aye.
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 Aye, I guess.
Aye.
Okay. Then we will talk with Deborah. She actually was supposed to be here tonight and was out sick. So our next item is this conditional use permit for J5 Construction, a major B home occupation located at 1731 West, 75 South. And I will turn time over to staff.
All right. All right, this conditional use permit is for Clint Stradbeck. Clint, are you here? All right, hi, sorry I didn't get a chance to say hi. He applied for this conditional use permit upon, he's building an accessory building in his backyard, and it was brought to our attention. Our department was made aware of the business being done at the home, and so to make sure that he's compliant with city ordinances, he has applied for a business license, and then because of the manner of his business, he is needing a conditional use permit. He is located at 1731 West, 75 South, and he lives on .46 acres. It's currently a single-family dwelling. He will be doing he's doing a concrete company, and as you can see here, that he's got lots of concrete. He's got lots of driveways, driveway there to put lots of equipment. However, for his business, he will only be using a skid loader with a flatbed trailer, a mini excavator with a flatbed trailer or enclosed trailer. I understand that the accessory building is to contain all of the equipment that he's going to be needing for this business. There will be no employees or customers coming to the home, and he has his DOPL license and is in good standing with the state. We did place noticing out on the property last Friday. We've received one email, I have 3 or 4 phone calls regarding the application from neighbors. Most of them are concerned basically of equipment being stored outside, values of their home being impacted, the size and scale of the business, and the proposed business operations being incompatible with a residential zone, including stormwater violations and safety. We've looked it over. We do have some findings and some conditions that would make it for us to give a recommendation. However, Planning Commission, you are able to put any new recommendations or conditions for the applicant. One of our findings is no more than 5% of the total lot, approximately 1,000 feet, including the dwelling and accessory structure, can be used for the business. The applicant is allowed a specific number, size, and type of vehicle as equipment as determined by the Planning Commission. The application has been reviewed by staff, and this business is compliant with City Zoning, Department of Commerce, and the Department of Public Licensing. The proposed use of is consistent with our major B home occupation. The applicant has been made aware of regulations and has agreed to comply. And when in compliance, this business will not have adverse effect on the use, enjoyment, or valuation of property in the proposed neighborhood is regulated by our major B home occupation. So staff is recommending approval of this conditional use permit with other conditions that Planning Commission see necessary for this applicant.
If I can just take a minute to, we have 2 conditional use permits tonight that the Planning Commission will hear. One of the things that is often misunderstood in these cases is the ability for the Planning Commission to say, no, we're not going to grant you the conditional use permit. The way Utah state law works is if we have it in our code, we have to approve it. It really means that this is a permitted use, but based on the use, there may be additional conditions that the Planning Commission would want to place on the permit to help ensure that it doesn't negatively impact the neighborhood and the existing characteristics of that neighborhood. So this item actually came to the city through a question a neighbor had about the size of the accessory dwelling that was being constructed, and that is in compliance with our code. We double checked that. But then it was realized at that point that there has been a business operation at the residence. So this is part of a process actually to bring the business into compliance. So I think some of the things that have been happening at the home would no longer be allowed with this conditional use permit. And some of that is outside storage of materials that is not allowed. But we do allow this type of a business with our zoning code, chapter 26. So one of the things the Planning Commission will need to determine tonight is the size and type and number of vehicles and equipment that you feel like is appropriate for a home occupation. So one piece of information, and we can ask Mr. Stredbeck to give that information to the commission, but we don't know the lengths of those flatbed trailers or the enclosed trailer. I think that'll be pertinent for the discussion that the council, or excuse me, the Planning Commission will have tonight. But I think with that, you know, we are limited to what is in our zoning code as to what conditions we can place on this conditional use permit. The main item of flexibility that the Planning Commission has is that equipment and vehicle. So just a quick background on that, and we know the applicant is here this evening. We have sent some of the public comments to him, and I asked him to be prepared to address some of those concerns so the Planning Commission can, you know, get a good idea for what would be appropriate for this conditional use permit.
Well, thank you. So let's have the applicant come up. State your name.
Clint Stredbeck.
Thank you.
Through this process, I have been made aware of a few things that I definitely think have opened my eyes and things that I can do better. I want each of you to know I do hold a full-time job. Construction is not my full-time job. It's a part-time business. So the amount of movement in and out of the home is part-time. It's also done within the hours allotted by city ordinance with noise regulations, which is a fairly wide window of opportunity or time allowed to make noise, or in some ways. Another thing is I'm also in the middle of, through permitting through the city, of building of a detached garage. I have a camp trailer that I would like to park inside to keep it nice. I have a boat that's in my garage right now that I will park into that exterior building. So the amount of stuff I plan to put inside the building is limited to the business. I understand that city ordinance says 5%, and so therefore I might have to make some adjustments to what I have to accommodate that to be in compliance with the city. I have two things going. I have a construction site for building my building. We're going to be beginning excavation of the ground. I have removed trees and landscaping and a basketball court that actually sit right where that building is going to go. Then I intend to re-landscape my entire backyard once that is finished. At the time, I do not have any other plans to change my occupation with what I currently do. My intention to do this was to allow an opportunity for my teenage sons to be able to work and learn the ethic of work. Now, if it expands beyond that, I don't know. You know, that's something I'm sure that can be addressed at a later time when that time happens. I do appreciate the concerns of my neighbor or any other neighbor that might have a concern. We do live in a nice area, and I think that my intentions are to re-landscape and make that back area nice and appealing and nice after I'm done with my construction. But when it comes to storage of materials outside, I think that there could be some clarification, because there is room for speculation or misinterpretation of what is deemed storable. My skid loader or an excavator typically sit on a trailer. The amount of work that I'm doing at my home would be offloading a trailer with a piece of equipment and maybe put it onto another trailer. I'm not building stuff out in my backyard necessarily. I still think that that's probably acceptable under the city ordinances. But majority of my movements of any type of equipment is just a place to store my equipment, work is done. One of the concerns is that my neighbor had is that there is equipment moving up and down the streets. On my street, I have done work for 8 homeowners on my street, a block away, almost 10 additional homes. So I am visible to where I have been working in the neighborhood as a contractor. I do think that that's within my right as a contractor, licensed through the state, to be able to work and perform construction services to those who hire me. And so there is movement. I do move in and out of my property. That's the way to access. I do think that it would be nice to be able to have a little bit of clarification of what the city deems as acceptable for storage. Currently, I have a construction site. I have been saving some lumber for building my building, and in the coming weeks, as soon as my concrete work's done at my home, I do plan to bring in lumber and build my structure. So lumber's something that's going to be seen in my yard. And has been, as I've been saving up some lumber, and that's stacked out on one of my fence lines. Now, I do keep equipment. Most of my equipment is very expensive. It's steel forms. I keep those in a shed that's on my property. That shed has to come down in my final approval, obviously, to get my building because of the square footage requirements from the city. Most of my equipment is stored in my enclosed trailer and in my shed. One thing I know that's in this process is it talks about logoing on a home. I don't have even logos on my trucks. So advertising or anything like that is not even present in my home, and I've done that intentionally. It's a part-time business. I don't need any more work than what I can manage on a part-time scale. So that's to kind of put into light some of my operational things. I'm also one that I'm not for employees coming and going, and I think that there's probably to an extent that's acceptable. I have a son that works for me. He's my employee. If I've ever had any contract individuals, it's usually met at the job. I don't feel comfortable having people coming into my homes, especially employees. And like I said, I don't plan to take this beyond where it is right now. And so therefore, I don't see in the future even having employees coming to my home, even after this is approved. And that will be something that I'll have to consider, at that time. But right now, that's not the time. I think that the request too is a little clarification of what vehicles are acceptable. I know that I'm not the only construction company in this zoning that has trailers and equipment. So a little understanding of what is acceptable, I think, is a fair question and one that I do too have. So that's all I have at the moment, in case there's any other questions.
Commissioners, any questions?
So how many vehicles do you keep on the property now?
I have I have one skid loader. Recently, I've purchased an excavator, mini excavator. It's not a large size excavator, it's steel tracks. It's plastic, rubber track. And I have 2 flatbed trailers that manage that, and then I have a fully enclosed trailer that I pull. 2 pickup trucks that manage that.
How many of them are longer than 22 feet?
The gooseneck is 20 feet. I have 2 flatbeds, I believe, are 16 or 18 feet, somewhere I'd have to measure the one.
Okay.
I do have a ATV trailer, and I do have a camp trailer, so.
Any follow-up, Commissioner Summerboard?
Are the ATV trailer and the camp trailer in addition to the enclosed
Yes.
trailer? So 3 trailers
Mhm.
and then 2 flatbed trailers.
I do intend, that's building of the building, I do intend to pull that camp trailer inside.
So with the new detached garage, would you foresee there being fewer things just on your property? Is that kind of the point? that
That's
you
the
have it
intention.
More enclosed once it's done, but right now it might look like a mess, and there might be lumber on site, but the intention is to get it all enclosed.
Yes, that's the intention.
So you had mentioned, and when Melinda or Mindy talked about 1,000 square feet, with the size of your property and the 5% restriction on space used, that's 1,000 square feet. Would you be able to put all of your equipment on that 1,000 square feet, do you think?
Yeah, my intentions are to build the building. Some of the equipment I can pull inside, and then some of it I could park.
Oh,
on the
okay,
south
so
side
some
of
would
my
be
building.
inside the
Yes,
building.
Some of it would be outside, but my enclosed trailer would be one that I'd park outside.
Right.
But again, if you saw the trailer, you wouldn't know what I do for a living or for a business. I mean, it's just a trailer.
Okay.
So I asked our city attorney about this particular portion of the code, and it is meant to be cumulative. So no more than 400 square feet of the home can be used for the home occupation. Collectively, no more than 5% of the lot can be used for the business.
So you're saying four?
I think the detached structure that's being constructed is 2,000 square feet, just short of, it's like 1,800.
Just under 2,000.
Yeah, so that will be a challenge, I think, given the amount of equipment and trailers and vehicles that is being proposed, to keep that within 1,000 square feet.
Oh, I see. So, because, yeah, I see the way that's written in the code. It talks about accessory buildings can be used, and then it says the home occupation, which I assume means everything. The buildings, the accessory buildings, all of it, shall not be more than 5%, which in this case would be 1,000 square feet.
Correct. That's not a lot of space.
That's not a lot of space.
But that's for anything, if I may, that's for anything that's business related, so.
Correct.
My exterior building is not intended for my business entirely. It's a portion to my building, which would allow me also some space exteriorly to park equipment. I do still believe that I could park the equipment at that time when that's finished, park that, whether it's a portion of it in the building and some of it outside of the building. I know that the complaint or the concern that my neighbor had was that building's used entirely for the business.
And that's not the
incorrect.
case.
That's not the case. Okay.
I mean, I have a camp trailer that takes up some space in my yard, which I'd like to organize a little better.
Well, it seems to me that if the home occupation is approved with the limitation of the 5% of the total lot area, then it's going to be up to the applicant to fit all of his equipment on there. And then, of course, city staff can inspect that at any time to ascertain that. But that restriction would be there, and then he would comply.
That's what I'm seeing. So it's just forms, it's mostly forms and stuff that you have, and then obviously your equipment.
The forms are still forms. I have still forms in my shed. If you were to look in there, there's still forms in there. I can't leave those out into the weather. They get ruined. They get
Yeah.
rust, so.
Okay.
Is there lumber? Yes, I have a stack of lumber at my home right now.
But it will be used to build the shed.
That's the intention. I've been saying.
Yeah, but in your site prep for that, I mean, obviously, there's a normal construction period that's allowed for building your building. So eventually that's going to go away, and then you'll be able to store. So, I mean, I kind of see two issues, is that you have your site prep getting ready to build this, which will then alleviate the other issue on the second side, on the business side. Okay. So, what's
So
your,
just to summarize, what I'm hearing from the applicant is the equipment, there's 2 trucks, 2 flatbed trailers, a skid loader, a mini excavator, and then an enclosed trailer
Yeah.
that he is proposing. So if I go back to that slide with the equipment, we should have 2 trucks, half-ton trucks, I don't know. We should have 2 trucks listed on there as well. And I assume there's 1 truck for each of those flatbeds.
But couldn't the trucks also be used for personal, like when I just thought it was just business, but you might have things that are overlaid personal, right, mixed with.
Both vehicles are licensed to me personally, so.
And the same thing I can do with the forms, but also there might be additional supply, just by the nature of the business that might be transit, like you might have them on site and then you use them for a job, but you're storing them before you do the job. So even if the city were to go out, my concern would be, well, what day are you going to go out, what time, because it could vary depending on what job you're working on. So to me, that would seem,
I think also a question that I have is exterior storage. If I were to have forms on a trailer that's not enclosed, I don't think everyone has an enclosed trailer. Is that storage exteriorly? That would, put into question my mind. Would that be not acceptable for the city if I had forms on a trailer? So there's plenty of questions to me, but potentially things that I wouldn't want to be out of compliance for, or give someone an opportunity to complain on me. So I do intend to abide by the ordinance.
I'm
There's
looking
just
at,
not enough clarity in what is acceptable or not acceptable. And I would like to understand that so that I can comply.
a question. I'm looking at the outside of the garage area, and there's the extra cement pad on the side with a fence. Does that pad continue behind the fence?
Correct.
Yes, it's fenced up to the front corner of that lot on the east side, and then so I have a fence around my entire yard, yeah. Privacy vinyl fence.
So how much of your,
Right now in that
Yeah.
picture, you can see number 2, those are 2 trailers that are sitting there. The other white one next to the shed is a camp trailer.
You're gonna build what, about like that?
There's a white trailer in the center there, that's all been removed. That's the basketball court I have that has been removed for the shop.
Hey, can I speak up just 1 second? I just done the math on his trailers. He said he had a 16-foot, I went 10, that's 160 feet. The 18-foot trailer is 180 feet. The enclosed trailer was 20. So it all adds up to 540 feet. If he put his excavator on one, he kept his forms on one, and he kept his mini X on one, he's under 600 feet.
Yeah, so I think 1,000 square feet is probably still
reasonable?
reasonable, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Dan.
Will any of your trailers be stored in front of the fenced area, in
No.
front of the home?
There's a fence, so it is privacy, so if I
Right.
park along the side, you might
Can't-
see the cab of the truck, but
That's it.
Okay. Commissioners,
Questions?
are we,
I mean, the ordinance says that the planning commission is to determine the number and size of the vehicles. That,
you can sit down.
it's hard,
Thanks.
hard for us to determine that number. Where he talks about the number of vehicles that he has, if he can fit that on, within the 1,000 square feet, probably would comply.
Otherwise, we're back here with another conditional use.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
or something else,
Well, it's enforcement.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I don't feel like I'm in a position to say how many vehicles he can have, If he can fit them all in the 1,000 square feet, more power to him.
Okay.
And they're not visible to the neighbors?
They're not visible once the shed's constructed.
Right.
Okay. Commissioner Packer?
Nothing to add.
Commissioner Keach? So, I think we're ready for a motion? Or conditions?
Well, yeah.
Let me just put this out there for the commission to consider in a motion. If you want to specify that he can continue to use the amount of equipment that he has now, that would be one thing to consider, or if the motion is just you can't have more vehicles or equipment take up more than 1,000 square feet, that could also be phrasing that could work. If, and part of the reason why our code says, or has these stipulations, is because businesses do tend to grow. And so if there was an instance in the future and the planning commission limited to the trucks, the skid steer, mini excavator, the 2 flatbeds, and the enclosed trailer, if there was additional equipment that was then being used, he would have to come back here for an amendment to the conditional use permit, which then, of course, the planning commission could approve or deny. Or we just get into a situation where staff is trying to enforce the conditions, and hopefully it wouldn't come to that, but we have had problems with that in the past with other businesses, and, we just work through that and hope it gets to a point where the business comes into compliance, and we don't have to get attorneys involved in all of that.
Okay.
Well, I would make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit for Major B Home Occupation for J5 Construction at 1731 West, 75 South, with the following conditions: that no more than 5% of the total lot area, including the dwelling and accessory structures, be used for the business. That includes the parking of vehicles and any other equipment and materials that he may have. So whatever he can fit on that in the way of vehicles. I think that's all. Am I missing anything else? Any other conditions we need on there?
No, I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We'll start with Commissioner Keach.
Aye.
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 That passes. Thank you. So we have next up,
I was just going to say, I will send you a letter with the conditions that we discussed tonight. I'll just send it to you through the portal. Finish approving the business license and a conditional use permit. And then if there's any other questions, feel free to reach us next week at the office.
conditional use permit for Mooney Construction, a Major B home occupation located at 278 East Shepherd Lane. And
This is a little bit different situation where we have the applicant not storing any equipment at the home. He's right on Shepherd Lane. It's a pretty, I think we all drive by it all the time, so it's a pretty popular little place to drive by. He's right there on 278 East Shepherd Lane. He is the owner of Mooney Construction. He's currently in the process of finishing up getting his DOPL license through the state. It kind of becomes a cart before the horse kind of situation. And so we thought we'd go ahead and get started with the conditional use permit. So once he does have that all finished up with the state, he can go ahead and get started. The business will be doing construction, remodeling, let's see, anything really related to the building process. Like I said, there will not be any equipment at the home, no employees, no customers. He does have trucks and trailers there at the home. However, they're all for personal use. And so that will not, it shouldn't affect anything with the business. We placed a sign out on the road the same day on December 8th. I received one phone call, and it was just from a neighbor wanting to see what was going on, if it was going to be turning into a duplex. They came up with some pretty good ideas, so they were happy when I told them that it's just a conditional use permit for a construction business, that there will be no equipment, no customers, no employees there at the home. The findings are very similar to the previous applicant. He has been made aware of the home occupation regulations. As far as equipment, we've talked about that. The application has been reviewed by us. He will be compliant with the Department of Commerce and Public Licensing, and as regulated by city ordinance. The business will not have any adverse effect on the use, enjoyment, or valuation of property in the proposed neighborhood. So staff, we are recommending approval for this conditional use permit located at 278 East Shepherd Lane with any conditions the Planning Commission feel are appropriate.
thank you. So
And applicant is here for any questions.
does the commissioners have any questions of the applicant? Okay. Any conditions we want to impose, any conditions we need to impose? Discussion? Okay. Are we ready for a motion then?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit for a major B home occupation, community construction at 278 East Shepherd.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and I'll start the voting. Aye,
Aye.
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 and that passes. Okay. Mindy? Mindy?
So, yeah, same thing. I will, stay in touch with me when you hear from the state. I'll send you your conditional use permit so that once we get that, we'll be check, and away you go.
Okay. We are here for item 7, consideration of the rezone application for 196 North, 200 West, from general commercial to mixed-use zoning district overlay. And I will turn time over to staff.
Thank you. This has been a project that's been in the making for about a year now. Earlier this year, the Planning Commission approved a subdivision of the property located there at 200, corner of 200 North and 200 West. And part of that subdivision is where the new Mr. Car Wash is going, and they'll probably be opening up next month. So there was, I think, 3 total lots created with that subdivision. And these 2 lots are the ones that are before us this evening. So the address 196 and 166 North, 200 West. So they have applied for a rezone to go from general commercial to the general commercial mixed-use overlay. The chapter or title Chapter 27, our mixed-use zoning code, requires that rezone application be accompanied by a development agreement and a lot of specific requirements that allows us to bring forward a complete project for the commission and then the city council to consider. So this is just an aerial view of the property, and let me get my mouse over on that screen. Again, this is where the Mr. Car Wash is being located. Photo Fly used to be here on the corner, and all of those buildings have been demolished. So current use of the property is vacant. Just a real quick look at the existing zoning in the area. You can see there's quite a variety. We have central commercial to the east, and this property is general commercial, has been zoned general commercial for quite a while. It is adjacent to the residential town site zone, which is kind of our whole old Kaysville historic area. And then there's some RM portions zoned a little further away from the property. When we consider rezones, what we do is we want to look to our general plan to see if there's support in our general plan for that rezone. And so I'm going to go through quickly, though, because I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, and they were in the staff report. But I'm going to go through the areas of the general plan that do support this application. The overarching general plan has 5 guiding principles, and the general plan was a very extensive public involvement process. It was approved in November of last year, and so all of these guiding principles and all the contents that were in the general plan have been determined by citizens and our planning commission and elected leaders. So there's 2 guiding principles and that fit into this: enrich our city center and downtown, and then provide diverse housing options. I'll get a little bit more into the city center in just a minute, but one of the things that Kaysville does lack is a lot of variety in our housing types. 92% of our housing is single family. So a little bit of diversity in there is, I think, a good thing for people in different stages of life, and maybe if they don't want to have a single family home. The future land use map does show this, and sorry, this is pixelated, but this does show this property right here as mixed use. And that future land use map is really kind of our first thing that we look at to see, is this something that the community would support? And based on that, obviously being mixed use, this is an application that would align with that portion of the general plan. The general plan also contains what has been called the city center preferred concept. This property is right there, I believe, if I'm pointing to the right location. So this property is within our city center concept, and hopefully we can get some further definition of that city center concept if we are able to do a small area plan with a grant application that I've applied for. But there's multiple goals and objectives in the general plan that speak towards trying to create that city center feeling and walkability and pedestrian friendly. So chapter 1 of the general plan is the land use and placemaking plan. There were 4 different goals in that plan, or in that chapter, that were connected to this application, and in particular, it does talk about the city center district, and there was also a goal that specifically mentions that we would like to, it's right here, this objective 2.1, that we want to improve commercial frontage and streetscapes along key corridors such as Main Street and 200 North. The location of this project is on 200 North, so that goal in particular supports the application. And our chapter 3, housing and neighborhood, is where the state has required all cities to add in a moderate income housing plan. So there's several goals and objectives in chapter 3 that also support this. And essentially we're trying to diversify our housing product that's available. So trying to provide a full range of housing opportunities that meet different lifestyles, different life stages. So with this project coming with 3 townhomes and 3 studio units, again, that's something that we don't have a lot of in Kaysville. So that definitely meets this goal. We also had agreed basically with this plan that when these applications would come forward and they would be a little bit higher density, or as Objective 1.4 mentions, we want to have this type of mixed use or a little bit more density near our commercial centers, our major corridors. This definitely fits that as well. And then lastly, our Chapter 5, which is our Economic Development and Prosperity chapter, just talks about promoting Kaysville City Center redevelopment to strengthen commercial areas. This is a redevelopment project. There were homes on the properties before. And so it's always great to see a redevelopment project that actually this, in the end, would add additional units or housing units that weren't there previously. But it also provides commercial space that the city would like to see. I struggle to think in the immediate vicinity if there's an office space right there. And so this would be, I think, a good addition to the area, because I know there's office space further up on Main, but there's really not office space. It's just more your strip malls and commercial retail. So, and then the goal 3, allow for mixed use development in identified areas to generate more rooftops and then prevent sales leakage. So there is a lot of support in the general plan for this rezone application. And I'll just go over some of the project specifics. But 3 buildings are proposed. One is a 10,280 square foot office. There's 6 residential units, so 2 buildings with that. One would be a bank of 3 townhomes that are 3 bedrooms, and then 3 studio units. All of those residential units would have a 2-car garage, and there's 36 parking stalls total proposed. There's additional details down there about the office is 2-story. They're proposing it be 32 feet tall. The code does allow heights up to 35 feet. So the heights of the buildings is within code. And one of the requirements of the zoning code as well is that you have at least 30% of the project be commercial. And so this exceeds that at 49%. So you basically have a 50-50 split here. This is just a look at the site plan, and we did have a resident come forward with some questions, so I'll just kind of try and answer some of those. But and I think some of our commissioners could probably speak to this more eloquently than I can, but the mixed-use zone is really trying to get people to use their vehicles left. So we're never going to eliminate the use of vehicles, but part of the way we encourage people to walk and leave vehicles is to have streetscapes and parking lots that are appropriately placed so that you don't have to walk across a sea of parking to get into a building. So the code actually requires that no more than 30% of parking be on a street frontage, and the code does have those buildings pulled forward. So if someone were to walk to work, they could just right off the sidewalk walk into the building and not have to cross through parking and dodge cars. And so this site plan, the way it's laid out, does meet the code. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. They are proposing at the south end of the project to put a 6-foot fence. There's an 8-foot landscape buffer between that and the property to the south, which is of residential use. And then they are proposing a couple of benches so that people, if they're out there with their dog or just want a place to sit outside, there is a location there for them to do that. Here's just some renderings of the project. So this is looking west. So if you were standing across 200 West over by the Jiffy Lube, then you'd be looking at this view. This is looking to the west. So this is the east side of the building, and you can see this is the parking lot pulled in from the street, kind of hidden, tucked back behind the building. And then just a couple of views. This is from the northeast corner and then the northwest corner. There's also, like I said, the 3 townhomes. What they are proposing with these townhomes, actually, they would have a basement. So they would be 2-story townhomes, but with a basement, 3 bedrooms each. And then the studio units would have that 2-car garage on the bottom and then the 400 feet of studio space up above. So we did send out public hearing notices, and we do that. We send those to 500, we send out notices to all property owners within a 500-foot radius. And so we sent out 31 notices, and then last Friday, we placed a sign on the property. So we have had a few comments, again, from residents, and I think these are very common concerns: traffic, density, parking, safety, stormwater, setbacks, location of parking, and fencing. And there was a traffic study that's required that they submit with the application. Our city engineer and public works department has reviewed that. There's no concerns with traffic that they feel with the project of this size and based on the study that was provided. The parking does meet the minimum requirements. Actually, there's one additional spot. Additionally, I think that having the residential mix with the office is a good shared time of use. So if there were visitors that came in the evening, the office spaces would be more available. And then with the 2-car garage, you can drive right in and go into your house. There were some concerns about where the stormwater would be piped. They would be required to tie into the stormwater pipes that are on 200 North. And then the setbacks, I explained that just a little bit, that really the code is contemplated and is very thoughtful about trying to put those buildings in a location that just make it feel better to pedestrians. And then again, the location of the parking, then you have that back behind the building. So we are recommending the Planning Commission send a recommendation of approval to the City Council, who would be the deciding body on this application. But based on the amount of support from the general plan and the compliance with code, we are recommending that this go forward to the City Council with a positive recommendation. And I'll just turn the time over now to the Planning Commission for questions. We do have the applicant here this evening. Okay. And of course, we'll need to have a public hearing.
Thank you. Does Planning Commission have questions of staff?
I was trying to think of one, but
That's a rare one. I think we've covered a lot of the issues. Any commissioners have any questions? Okay. I will, once again, we will be holding a public hearing on this item. Remind you have 3 minutes to speak. It is your time to talk. We will
Hey,
not,
Steve, can we hear from the applicant maybe first?
do you want to hear from that, or do you want to, let's do it after?
Well, it'd be good to hear what the applicant has, but I'm fine.
We'll do the
However you
applicant
want to do
after.
that.
Okay. And then we'll let the, do you want to mix it up? We've always done that the other way.
You're the chair, you choose.
We'll do the public hearing first.
Okay.
Okay. And then it's your time to talk. We will not engage in conversation with you. We will answer any questions that you ask after, and only speak to this issue. We're only discussing rezone. And then, so I will open up a public hearing for this agenda item. If you're here to speak to it, please come up, state your name and address, and we will open the public hearing.
Chair, did you want to limit the comments to 3 minutes as well?
I did.
Okay.
James Pearson. I live on 2nd West, right across from where the development is taking place. As much as I can appreciate the city's desire to provide diverse housing, I would like to point out the #1 bullet on the Kaysville City General Plan cover page that says, preserving Kaysville's small-town feel by regulating new development and protecting single-family neighborhoods, which is where we are, is the #1 bullet. You know, I would suggest that there's probably more than one area where diverse housing could be, could be developed, not necessarily in our single-family neighborhood. That said, I would like to read some things that I sent to the Planning Commission 2 years ago concerning this development. The drainage issue was a big one because right on 2nd West, there's a storm drain that drains into our storm ditch that doesn't go anywhere. It's blocked off. And every time we get a heavy rain, it fills up and it overflows down my driveway. So that's an inappropriate way to drain the water over there. I would suggest that the city cause that they reroute that sewer to a main sewer system, not into my drainage ditch where the old irrigation water used to flow, which is now out of service. So that's one of the issues we have. Right now, the water accumulates in a ditch and becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes, and the debris that flushes into the ditch becomes an anaerobic pile of stink, and we got to clean it out. It shouldn't, the commercial property shouldn't be able to allow to drain their water into a place where it can't go anywhere. So hopefully they can make that a conditional, something conditional to the development. So far, the other thing I can say is the traffic. I asked to get a traffic impact study. Here's the traffic impact study page. Sorry. I know you did one, but the letter I sent concerning traffic, I'm sure you guys did a lot of work looking at it, but vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians are dependent on the safety and functionality of our streets and roadways. A comprehensive traffic study, which includes neighboring side streets, should be undertaken by a reputable and independent engineering company. I don't know if that was done. They should identify and document any deficiencies or improvements necessary to accommodate and/or mitigate the projected traffic volumes any development will create. Recommendations should be implemented and become criteria by which the design of any development is guided. Please keep our streets safe and uncongested. Right now, you go out on 2nd North, and when the light turns red on 3rd West, it backs up all the way to the Vasa exercise place. It's pretty hard to get out of that side street because of all the traffic. And it's very likely that people are now, I mean, anytime you go out on the street, you gotta be careful because everybody's cutting through. They want to avoid the main light on Main Street and Second North, so they cut through my neighborhood and they zoom through the streets doing 35, 40 miles an hour as fast as they can get to work. And I understand that, you know, they want to get where they gotta go, but, you know, if they were to include, what is it? 6 new residences in there, traffic would definitely increase because those people now need to drive up and down that 25-foot wide street, which is exactly how wide it is from blacktop to blacktop. There are no shoulders. It's just soft shoulders. And when it rains, everybody pulls into them and leaves ruts.
You're over time, sir. We need you to finish.
Say again?
You're over your 3 minutes.
You're over 3 minutes.
So we need you to wrap up.
Oh, I gotta stop talking?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
My name is Kelly Sakarad. I'm here on behalf of my 92-year-old mother that lives at 144 North, 200 West, right next door to this proposed development. We're also concerned about traffic. We're concerned about privacy. And we are opposed to changing it to mixed use. If it stayed commercial and there was office buildings, that would probably cut down on traffic, just because there's not additional 6 households with more cars and more stuff. So we're just, you know, you say people support this plan, but I haven't talked to one person in our neighborhood that supports this plan. So if you lived in this neighborhood, you probably wouldn't support it either, so.
How do you spell your last name?
It's Siekra.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kent Fox. I'm the son of Rita York, which lives at 144 North, 200 West. And I'm in opposition to the rezone. When it was commercial, my understanding was her fence, it would be 20 feet away from her, and her house is only 5 feet from the fence. So you put these condos in there. She can look out her kitchen window across this new 6-foot fence and into the wall, which is 8 feet from the fence. So concerned about her privacy also. Understand these buildings on the south side, which looks into her property, they're gonna have windows. They're privacy again. She's got a little over a half acre, so she's already butted up and lost a bunch of trees and stuff to Mr. Car Wash.
Yeah.
So she's right against that fence. I mean, 20 feet would be better than 8 feet. Of course, I know they're trying to jam everything they can in there to meet your plan and da-da-da-da-da. But we just disagree with the mixed use due to her privacy. And then, of course, the traffic. There's going to be more traffic. He explained it. That's busy, busy, busy right there. And everybody hits them side streets. When you put condos and another business on the corner, it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. What's determined as acceptable is in the eyes of the beholder, I guess. So that's my concerns.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Judy Goran, Goran, at 1087 West Barnes here in Kaysville. Sorry, Judy Goran, Goran. My husband and I own the retail businesses directly across the street from where this development is apparently going to take place. I have a couple concerns. When we built our property, the city made us put in, addressing the drainage issue, they had us put in a large drainage underneath our parking area, and I'm concerned that with all of this flat area that will now be blacktopped, that it will overwhelm our system. I don't know if you have plans on putting another system under that to help out with this, because I know that it's not fair to the neighboring owners to have this flooding issue, and I don't think it's fair for us because we had to pay a lot of money to have this addition put into our property. And I don't want their property to overwhelm our system. The other problem that I want to talk about is the aesthetics of this building. I understand that it's within code to have a two-story building there, and you know that's just the fact. You can't change that. But if you go along 200 North and our Main Street, every building there has a certain look to it, almost every single one. I know that when we built our buildings, we tried to make them look more of a appropriate for Kaysville, which is our hometown, Utah's hometown look. This here looks like it belongs downtown Salt Lake, maybe downtown Ogden, the big city feel. It does not look attractive whatsoever. It looks like a big box, and I don't think Kaysville is a place to put a big box. I think it needs to be more aesthetically pleasing and conform to the look of what we want our city to look like. As far as the congestion goes, like they are talking about, I do agree that if you put in these residential apartments or condos, whatever you want to call them, I lost my train of thought, sorry. If you look at it, I don't know where they will put a dumpster. It doesn't look like there's enough of a buffer between the south side and the residential. I know when we built ours, we have like a 20-foot buffer between us and where the apartments are behind ours. That does not happen here. I understand, you know, his family member is now going to be looking at an 8-foot wall. We had to step that back when we built ours. I think that it's fair that they have to step that back also, just for the aesthetics of the neighborhood and the livability of the people that already live there. So I think that's about all I have to say, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, my name is Farzin Guran. I'm her husband. I work for her, but anyway, I want to apologize if I repeat something because my hearing aids are in shop and I couldn't hear everything, so I might repeat some of this stuff. But we have lived in Kaysville basically since 1988, and we do have a business also, like she said, right across from the proposed area. My main concern is the traffic that is coming, which I noticed this lady here talked about all the benefits that this new proposal is going to bring. However, you know, when there was concern, it took maybe 10 seconds to say, these are the concerns that came out and gone, which was all a good concerns that really deserves to look at and think about. I've been here when there was no overpass, and you had to go to the west side, you had to stop sometimes half hour for the train to go by, then you can pass the train track. Okay, so that kind of traffic I'm used to and I've seen, and now I see the traffic at the rush hour when you get off I-15 and you try to get into Kaysville, the disaster that has been created on the 400 West, which is by all the new businesses that has been approved there. And if you try to come up from 400 West to get on 200 North, you'll be there for half hour. I don't know if any of you guys experienced that or not, but right after that, there's a red light, and on the 200, on the 300 West also. And then if, you know, I'm all for diversity and, you know, developing the city center, but we also have to look at the causes that creates the problems that creates. You know, so are we gonna put a red light on the 400 too, which is gonna eventually affect everybody? Okay, so there's 6 residential area that they're proposing. Okay, there's 6 parking garage, and the other 6, I don't know where they're gonna park. These people are, because even though it's gonna be a single resident studio apartment, with the economy that it is, which we all understand, most likely there's gonna be at least a couple living there, each one have a car, never mind their visitors. Okay, so where are they gonna park? In a street that is not designed, it doesn't have even a curb and gutter, or it doesn't have sidewalk. It's an old street, okay? So I'd like the commission to take a look at the traffic that it's gonna bring, and are we prepared to handle this kind of traffic? Are people gonna be able to eventually go home after work, get to their home? You know, this is, 200 North is not that big, the commercial part of it, all the way from I-15 all the way to the main street. But it takes, in the rush hour, it takes already quite a bit of time just to get from this end to the middle time. So please consider all this before you approve. You know, I realize growing is good, I'm all for it, diversity is good, but please consider all the other issues that are gonna bring with itself. You know, if I was a developer, of course I wanna put as much property as on a small piece of property to have profit. But it's you guys' job to look for everyone else and make sure we don't create a mess, a disaster, which is, please, if you haven't, which I know you all have, but if you haven't, just try to get on I-15 to the 200 North in a rush hour.
Thank you. That's your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and we'll have the applicant come up.
A name?
Yeah,
Gonzalo Calquid.
okay. Thank you.
That's not how we've been saying it.
Melinda shall know.
Commissioners,
Questions?
questions?
Yeah.
Is there anything that I missed in my presentation that you'd like to speak to?
No, I was actually just telling my coworker that was probably the best description of a project I've seen. So she covered everything, wonderfully illustrated. I would like to maybe just point out a few things that I heard from the public comment. Just some things I noted. You know, the concerns of protecting the single-family neighborhoods. Obviously, one of the big interests for us in this project is, you know, taking a a fully commercial site and creating a transition from commercial, from 200 North down to the residential. And I think this project does that very well by, you know, introducing 3 townhomes there as you drive south. You know, it really buffers the use, which I think is more important than perhaps, you know, proximity. I mean, obviously that is also a concern that was brought up. You know, we are putting a fence up, and the alternative is, I think, much worse. You know, for the neighbors. You know, a full commercial building that, you know, would have to be 20 feet away, but height-wise would completely be a much worse alternative height-wise and privacy and things like that. So we think this project accomplishes that really well, creates a good buffer, and as Melinda stated, creates a very good diversity in types of units, which are not commonly found in Kaysville. And overall, I mean, it's a pretty small development. Traffic was one of the other big concerns, and obviously, you know, we submitted a traffic study that was prepared by a traffic engineer, and I think I heard from you, Melinda, that the engineers reviewed that and there was no concerns with trips generated. I mean, we're really talking about a very few number of cars that's added to the existing roads. One other item was storm drain. Obviously, our development in connection with the development of the car wash, the plans for storm drain are already figured out. We're connecting to 200 North, and we'll let our engineers obviously handle that, but that's not a concern from our standpoint, and all of our stormwater will be routed north and handled, so that's not a concern on our end. I think I heard a comment about the soft shoulder. So as part of our development, obviously, we will be improving the curb all the way down to the southernmost border of our property, which currently there's no curb. It's just kind of it turns to gravel and into the grass. You know, and we have a full intention to, you know, try to maintain. We have 2 big, beautiful trees right in front of the townhome, so we're kind of shown in our landscape plan. You know, our hope is to, if construction and the upgrade of that curb allows it to maintain that, and just to keep, you know, those beautiful big trees. If again the construction process allows that, obviously there could be roots that, you know, might need to be eliminated. But yeah, that's our intent. I mean, we think this is a great use, the location of the buildings, and you know, the owners obviously have intention to run their business here. You know, this is not just a development for someone else. That there's self-interest here to run a business and to occupy this space in Kaysville. And same thing with the residential units. I just wanted to clarify too, they're not for lease apartments. I mean, the intent is that these will be for sale. I mean, the ability to sell these individually. So that's, I think, a huge benefit too to the, as Melinda stated, for, you know, different people in different stages of life to have the ability to buy or use, and you know, a small studio, which is probably not available anywhere in Kaysville. So, and yeah, I mean, I think the other comments I heard were regarding maybe design or aesthetics of the building, and I don't know that I can really comment on that. I mean, obviously we're designing this for a certain user, and we're in compliance with the design standards of Kaysville City. So, yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have, or.
Can I just clarify a few of your points so you can tell me if I'm understanding
Sure.
correct? So what you're saying is the storm drain issue will actually improve between you and Mr. Car Wash. That will be handled and taken care of, right? Secondly, that the height of the residential area will actually be lower than a commercial buildings, and that helps it transition towards the housing. If it was commercial right next to the housing, it'd actually be taller, meaning that the privacy would be more of an issue than it is currently.
Correct, yes. I mean, the alternative on a site like this, you know, it's not a huge lot, so for commercial development, really, it's a longer, taller, bigger office building with a bigger parking lot. And cars right next to your fence is probably not ideal. So, I mean, obviously the use, the residential use on the southern border of the property is probably the best buffer that we can, you know, and we've provided a bigger setback than the house to the south currently has to the property line. And obviously that'll be landscaped very nicely with a fence.
And then the soft shoulder will be handled with curb and gutter. And
yeah, just whatever city standards will require there on upgrading the road.
And from the pictures of the residential, it looks like the bottom area are all garage, right? And the homes on the other side of the fence, are they single-story?
So what you're seeing on the screen is the townhomes that are up against 200 West, or is that?
Yeah, 200 West.
Those will be 2-story above ground and then a basement, so they'll be probably a couple feet, with the little porch off the ground. The rear studios
portion.
are garages on the ground level, and then you walk up the stairs to a small studio apartment above.
I understand. Thank you, those are my questions.
Gonzalo, could you expand a little bit more? You said the storm drain, it should be improved between your site and Mr. Car Wash, but how could I feel rest assured as a resident right behind that the current issues wouldn't?
Yeah, currently, if you think about a residential lot, obviously water just kind of runs, right? In a commercial development, that's all handled and that's all reviewed by engineers, and all that water has to remain and contained inside, no water from the development. And correct me if I'm wrong, Melinda, if any of these, or I don't know if we have a city engineer present, but none of that water can or should leave that lot. So it's all contained, anything from our roofs is fully contained through gutters and then brought down onto the site and then either handled through sewer or storm drain. So
Or retention.
really, from a commercial development standpoint, all the water on that site will be handled and taken care of. It shouldn't have any, and yeah, please feel free to confirm that.
Yeah, so they'll have to provide that design during the building permit phase. So we are actually updating our code. So old code said they had to do a 10-year storm, where new codes, they're gonna have to do a 100-year storm. So they're gonna have to detain more than previous projects would have in the past. It doesn't all have to stay in the site. He just has to control the release into the system so it doesn't overwhelm the system. So it'll go underground, stay there for a little bit, and then slowly release into that UDOT system.
Thank you, Dexter.
Melinda mentioned that there was a traffic study that was submitted. And then there was a question raised by one of the public about who did the study. Can you tell us who did this traffic study?
Yeah, the traffic studies was done by Hunt Day Engineering.
Okay.
Independent
I'm not an expert on traffic analysis, but I can say that, I did speak with him about the findings of the study and just, and yeah, if you have any comments on that, I don't know, I'd be happy to hear from you. Probably more educated than what I can say on the.
Yeah, so I was able to review that study, and he uses the ITE trip generation, which is industry standard. And I had him look at 200 north at 200 west, 4 intersections. So we got 200 west at 200 north, 100 north, 100 north and 300 west, 300 west and 200 north. That's a lot of numbers, but kind of those 4 intersections. And with that study, level of service did not decrease. If there wasn't a decrease in level of service, which means more waiting time, then we would require some sort of mitigation to happen. But with peak hour, this development is projected to produce like 16 trips in the peak hours, which is pretty minimal.
Right. And then there was the question raised about the design to match the neighborhood. I see what your building looks like. Yeah, it's different. I don't know, would you give any consideration to maybe modifying that design some? And I'm not exactly sure how, though.
Are you speaking about the commercial building or the residential?
The residential.
Yeah, the residential building, in fact, is, honestly, it's quite a bit of an upgraded architecture. We're going after kind of a brownstone look, which is, if anything, probably gives an older appearance, which, if anything, gives a little bit more of respect to a historic neighborhood. A typical townhome of current budgets that allow this is obviously much more expensive than what you see built in. So I think if anything, our townhomes and the style we're going for are a big upgrade to what you commonly see built in the valley. So.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion?
A couple points. Particularly to some of the comments that we heard about this. I mean, our city general plan does very strongly seem to support this. We do have general commercial zoning in place, but the plan calls for mixed use, and this would be a change to mixed use, so it would be more in conformity with what our general plan currently is calling for. The general plan that, as Melinda indicated, had a lot of public input and discussion by both the Planning Commission and the council, and was approved by both. And so I see that, what's being proposed here would fit in with what our general plan calls for. Just traffic a little bit. If this were to remain commercial rather than go to mixed use and have these residential units, I think we'd see a lot more traffic than what we're going to get out of this proposed development coming in there. So, I think in terms of what the development is, it's actually going to reduce what the potential traffic might have been. We've addressed the stormwater issues a little bit, and the building design. So, that's kind of the points I might have on this to raise, to discuss.
I want to say, I mean, it's redevelopment. Redevelopment is obviously one of those things, but you're providing a buffer between a residential use and a commercial use, which I think, I don't know, if I live next door, I'd rather have housing rather than a McDonald's drive-through.
Yeah.
And I think, you could argue, okay, so you actually get more value as a developer by putting in that type of use. So this is actually, a mixed use like this is actually
Negotiation.
is better for the residents as you're buffering in like that.
Well, and to that point, the commercial zone allows 30-foot height. The old township zoning that we have there allows 30-foot height. 35, yeah, thank you. That's right, Melinda. It allows a 35-foot height. That the side yard in that township zone is only 8 feet between residences. A commercial use adjacent to this would have had to do 20 feet, but it's not going to be a commercial use. It's going to be a residential use. It's going to be butting up against the property, which, if it were in that township site, would only be required to have 8 feet, so it matches that. And it complies with the height in the old township zone. So, I don't see a lot of unusual impact from this development. In fact, I see that it complies pretty well with the zoning as it exists, and even with the modifications.
Correct. Any comments, discussion down here?
And this is about zoning, not about how the structure looks at this point.
Correct.
Right?
Please proceed, but I do have a few answers to some of the questions that were brought up in the public comments. So if Commissioner Packer wants to give his comments, and then I can address some of those questions.
Yeah, I was just going to echo some of the things that have been said. The city council makes the ultimate decision, and I'm sure will welcome all of your comments. And we're tasked with kind of looking at this a little more objectively, looking at the plan, looking at the different things. I guess I would just echo what Commissioner Suncorn said, that I think I would rather allow this in than allow some of the things that could come in with just the simple commercial zoning that it currently is and has been for a long time. So I just wanted to echo that.
Thank you. Melinda?
Yeah, so I did want to clarify, sidewalk, curb, and gutter would be required. It does exist in this area, I believe, but the new construction, the new project would require that curb, gutter, and sidewalk be put in at this location. There was a question earlier before the meeting about, why isn't there 2 drive approaches, 2 points of ingress, egress on this project? 200 North is a UDOT facility, and as such, we don't have any say in what happens on that street between Main Street and then even further across the underpass of I-15. So UDOT would not allow access off of 200 North for this. In fact, with the Mr. Car Wash, they had to combine the entrance with Golden West Credit Union. So we can control access off of 200 West, No access will be granted by UDOT off of 200 North. I did want to speak to, in our residential zones, the height of a home is allowed at 30 feet. The commercial zone allows 35 feet. So the townhomes would be slightly taller than what a single-family home would be, but this just is not a good location for a single-family home. In addition, we require at least an 8-foot setback on a side yard for a residence. And so this does meet our minimum requirements for all our residential zones up through R18. R16 is a 5-foot setback. And so this does, the project actually does increase the setback. I just measured on both our GIS layer and Google. The home that was demolished had a fiber, it's hard to really measure accurately on a computer screen, but between 5 and 6 feet. So at 8 feet, you're actually getting a couple more feet of a setback from those residential buildings. And then we do consider, there were some questions about, setbacks and parking and that type of thing. So the mixed-use zone does have different requirements with projects that are abutting a residential lot than what the general commercial zone has. But we would consider a residential use, which is a townhome or a studio unit, compatible with a residential use. So that was considered as we looked at this application. I think there would be more privacy issues if there was an office that could be, usually your office, you have a lot of glass walls, people can look out. In a townhome, on this north side of this townhome, it's showing 2 windows. There may be a third that's obstructed by the tree that's there, but you wouldn't have more than 2 or 3 windows. But with an office or another commercial building, you could have a lot less privacy with just how those buildings are constructed. And then the Chapter 27, our mixed-use zone, does also have requirements for some of the architecture. And so the look and feel that I think they have presented with the office building in particular does meet those requirements with the architecture and having the, gosh, I'm blanking on the name, the fenestration that you want to see, and the glass and that type of a thing that just does add a lot of value to that pedestrian experience. And then just on a different note, right, somebody who lives in this townhome, maybe they work in the office and so they don't even have to get into their car. This would be an easy walk over to Walgreens. When I lived in Harrisville, there were times when I would walk over a mile on a very, very busy street. I'd take my dogs, I'd leave them outside, I'd go and pick a prescription and walk back. This would be a really easy walk for somebody, like I said, post office, Walgreens, just across the street is your fitness club. So there is potential really for some of those vehicle trips to be reduced based on the location of this, and then just the type of, that's exactly the type of outcome we want to see from a mixed-use project. I think that was everything I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Melinda. Commissioners?
I'm good.
Any further discussion? I think we're ready for a motion.
You want to do it, Rachel?
Okay, I'll make a motion. I'd like to motion that the rezoning application for Gonzalo Calaquin, sorry, I probably totally slaughtered her name, Sector 317 LLC with 317 Sycamore LLC on 196 and 166 North, 200 West, from general commercial to general mixed use overlay, be approved with the findings supplied by staff.
So Rachel, we're recommending to the council.
Oh, we're recommending that council
Approval.
consider.
No, yeah, recommending approval.
Recommending
Okay.
approval.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have a second?
I would second, and with a couple of comments, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
My comments are that I would support the motion because I feel that this complies very specifically with the general plan recommendations for this area. To the issue of traffic, I think that doing this rezone and getting this kind of a proposed development will actually result in less traffic than what might have occurred there had it been remained generally commercial. And that it provides some variety in the housing that we have been looking for in Kaysville as outlined in our moderate income housing plan and in our general plan. And that it's, our plans call for that to be adjacent to our major roadways, and this would be adjacent to 200 North, so it meets that criteria as well.
Thank you. So I have motion second. We'll start the voting with.
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Okay. Next up is.
Oh, do you want, should we indicate what happens next, Melinda? This goes to the council?
So what'll happen next for those that are interested in this item, it'll be on an upcoming city council meeting agenda. I actually wanted to speak to applicant. It may be January 4th, or it might be, January 18th. But the city council is the deciding body on this action item, or as it's a legislative item, they would be the one to make that decision. So I know we already have quite a bit on our January 4th agenda, so I was wondering if there was going to be flexibility, but it would either be on January 4th or January 18th. You can check our website for those agendas. We do not send out another notice because we won't have another public hearing. But you do have an opportunity to come. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. So we include all of the comments that we received. So there were some emails we received. I include those in the packet for the city council. We do redact contact information, so that's protected. We like to have draft minutes included in that as well, so that the council can see those comments that were made during the public hearing. I also generally include the link to the discussion on this item, the Planning Commission. So it's timestamped to when this discussion started, and our council members and our mayor are very good about watching these meetings, which is a wonderful thing that they do. And then at the city council meeting, you can come early and sign up to speak. You do have to sign up for the city council meeting, and they allow up to 10 people to sign up and comment on the item. So if you want to come back and speak to the city council, if you want to call our office in a couple weeks and determine, we can tell you which date it's next step in the process. So we do appreciate your time and your comments. And like I said, we do try and make every effort to get all of those comments through to the city council so that they understand what the public is concerned about.
Thank you. Next up is agenda item 8, public hearing for text amendments for Title 17, 18, and Title 19. This is the most exciting thing all night.
So Dexter is going to do the bulk of this presentation, since subdivision really is a more technical part of land use. But what our plan is to just pull, and this is super annoying because the way I have my screen, like it's backwards. So dragging thing from one screen to the other it's backwards for me of what I do every day. But we were just going to go through each of the draft codes and just kind of address the changes that were made and why. I was going to take Title 17, which really is just kind of housekeeping. We had some very specific notations to exact sections of code. I'm just going to reference the Title 19 instead of an exact section, and then that way if we ever have to change the code again, we don't have to go back and change other code, which, by the way, the whole reason why this is in front of us is because the state legislature at the 2023 session changed state code, and we have
Drastically
to
change state code.
Yeah, well, that's all they do at the session is change state code. Sometimes they add it, but most of the time they
I was
change
gonna
it.
say, I'll interject. I mean, since 2016, all we have seen is serious changes in land use law coming out of the legislature. I mean, it's been drastic.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
wait until this session.
And this session, I think, I think 2024 is going to be the granddaddy of them all.
well, and they're already saying that. So this is all because of Senate Bill 174 from last session. The league and all the information sources out there are saying they're going to have to make some changes to the code that they just changed, which will probably necessitate us to come back and change our code again.
Yeah.
It is difficult to write code. Getting it correct is very difficult. And I think after the fact, right, it's often realized that some of the changes that they put in place just don't work very well. So we do anticipate there will be more changes, but the state legislature set a deadline that this needs to be in place by February 1st. And so again, Title 17 is just pretty simple, straightforward. It's mostly references, cleaning up the references. There really wasn't anything of substance in Title 17. So if you don't have any questions for 17, I think we could just move on and go to Title 18 and 19.
Melinda, can I interject before we get too far?
Yeah.
I think the goal of this is to simplify our lives here as a commission. And I'd like the discussion, as you're thinking through this, to potentially go the fact that we can take subdivisions out of our purview and make an administrative item. I'd really like to see us potentially do that. It wasn't, I think Wilf told me earlier that we used to never see subdivisions. And then the state put them in as a public item. And then also now we were doing a planning commission and city council. I think, being in public administration, working in municipal areas, anytime we can take an item and make it, you have the public process laid out here in code, is detailed, your citizens can read it, we're making a change, we have a public hearing to announce this. I think really it's honestly one of the better things we can do as a commission, because there are times when we have really, really hot-bedded discussions about subdivisions. We go and put a sign out there, people come in. Well, subdivisions have to be approved. And all of a sudden now, you have this plat in front of you, and you've got neighbors from 500 feet, and they're with pitchforks and torches saying, well, we don't want this. And it's like, you've got to approve. By state law, you have to approve the subdivision. Unless there's a factual legal error somewhere in that subdivision that the potential citizen may not find. I mean, it's legally, obscure. It's been through the process. I mean, it's been through the engineering. It's been through our CPD people. It's been through all the departments. It's been through the sewer district. I mean, if all those boxes are checked, it really ought to go on an administrative route. And I will argue it's a better use of time than having us sit here getting the citizens really angry about it, really angry, and angry at the city about an issue to which we can't make a change. I mean, we have to approve it by state code. So is this a direction we really want city council to go? I would argue yes, that we want to go back, because I think that's the direction that the legislature is pushing this, because it makes it so that if I, as developer, come in, it actually simplifies the process of development. And anytime that time is money, anytime you can do that, I think we want to make that easier. I mean, anytime we can take an application and make it administrative, it makes it easier. And I'll just say this one last thing. We used to do chicken permits in this city. People would have to sit here, and they'd have to come, they'd have to present, I've got 5 chickens on my property. We don't do that anymore. This is one of these processes that I really think that we really need to think hard on. Is this a process that benefits the public good, and secondly, is cogent to the arguments that can be changed. It can't be changed. I mean, I think one of the, and I'll go back, there was a certain gas station that we went through this whole process on, and one of the council, hold on, you're all shaking your heads. There was a council member at the end of it said, I'm really angry because there's nothing we can do. We have to approve it. And I really think if it's that much of an administrative process, then we probably ought to put it in the administrative realm. There's a public process here. We're seeing that public process. It's in code. I can go read code. I can figure out how to get this done. That's where I'm leaning. I think we should make a recommendation. I'm going to lean towards that and go back to the way it used to be done.
It's probably a better use of resources.
People always
$16.
people always argue that government's inefficient. This is inefficient.
Well, I mean, it's the difference between legislative issues and administrative ones. What we just did with this rezone was a legislative process.
Correct.
And in that one, it's entirely appropriate to have the comments from the public and hear their opinions and whether they like it or not and why they, that's entirely appropriate. It's a policy level discussion and a decision. We are guided in that decision for a rezone by what we did with the general plan, which is also a legislative process. But it was entirely appropriate. When you get to administrative items, if they meet the requirements of your code, you're obligated to approve them. And it's almost, what's the point of a hearing?
And I'll go back. I mean, in my years of experience, I mean, the economic development director and the planning director for Reno got together for the county and said, how can we make this easier to attract development? So when Tesla went out there, it's a one-page form. You pay the fee, and that's it. I mean, you just come in, the subdivision's done. And it was really interesting because he came and spoke to Economic Development Corp, EDC Utah, and spoke about that process, how they took most of what they're doing on the preliminary development so that almost all the secondary is being done at the staff level as soon as they're submitting plans, as soon as they're submitting it, because that's really where it needs to happen. And I really think, maybe that's too broad, but maybe not. I think we really need to look at what can we have staff do? What do we need to be doing here? But really where it's prescriptive almost, what we can't do and can do. I mean,
Yeah, it pretty much is.
And we're being told, legislatively, you don't have a say. Now it's a prescriptive administrative item. And we really get a lot of people's hair on fire about stuff that we can't change.
And so, I mean, these changes are being made because we're being required to by legislation. And that was modifying the subdivision process overall. And I think our city engineer is going to address some of that. I'm not sure that the legislative changes really did make it all much clearer, but that's another issue. We do have to make some changes, and we're probably going to have to make some again after this next legislative session because there were some issues that weren't real clear with the last change, and they're probably going to get clarified during this next legislative session.
Or unclarified.
We have to make those changes. I think our city engineer is going to tell us what those changes are. A lot of it has to do with the process and how many reviews you can do of a subdivision plat and how that all works. But in terms of public review, so at one time, state code did require that you had to have a public hearing on subdivision plats. About 4 or 5 years ago, that requirement was removed. And it was removed because, again, everyone was beginning to recognize for administrative processes, what's the point of a public hearing? Because when the public comes, they usually give you their opinion. They don't give you a lot of facts. Legislative decisions are totally appropriate with opinion. Administrative decisions are not. There it's fact-based and evidence-based. Do they meet the requirements? And so I think what Melinda and the engineer are proposing here is that we make this entirely an administrative process with no hearings. And I think it's, probably appropriate.
And I'll go, Melinda, pardon me. I think it's the same amount of work on the staff either way. But there's actually a higher layer because now you're taking out having to notice it. And I think, but the burden is on them, on the staff, but they're already doing all that work up front. We're just removing that public process that was been public so far. And I think I'll say this, kind of reading through legislation, I think we're going in the direction that the state legislature is going to go finally.
Well, it was interesting, just give you a little aside. I mean, I think that's the administrative process was the direction that they were going. until a lot of citizens began to hammer on the legislators saying, we need to have input into this process. And so the first draft of the legislation that I saw actually required that there be a public hearing on a subdivision plat. But when it was explained about the administrative process and so on to the legislators, they changed that. They didn't take it out. What they said was that a local jurisdiction could hold up to one public hearing if they so chose. We didn't require it, but it said you can have one. And I was really opposed to that. I was like, why even introduce the idea of having public hearings for administrative items again? But that was being driven again by the pressure coming from the public, who they feel like that they have the ability to get the council or get the planning commission to say no to an administrative item, which you can't do if they meet all of the requirements.
And I don't know if you saw, I mean, this is a total long discussion, but I don't know if you saw in Orem, Wright Development won their lawsuit because they were denied a planning commission on a
Yeah.
subdivision. It's been 3 years, but they finally won last night, and the city council passed it. I mean, it's a nice mixed-use development right on 800 North and Main Street in Orem. And it's going to redevelop. It's a lot larger scale than what we're doing. But that process started in 2019, went on for a year of back and forth. Hey, here's our plans, here's this. Finally, in 2020, they were denied planning commission and city council. Wright Development sued them, saying, look, we've complied with all of your administrative requirements. And a judge sided with Wright Development and said, yes, you have to do it by development agreement. So the development agreement was before Orem City Council last night, and lo and behold, it passed. But it was a 3-4 vote. But I think, oh yeah, even then, and I think ultimately, you look at what's coming down the pike. I mean, we need to get to a process where, the cities know what they want, but the code says it, and that's what the judge told Wright Development, is you are in the right to develop your property how you see fit.
Yeah, I feel like the citizens' concern is that they feel that the developers may be in bed with the city or city planners, I think that's where it's coming from. But to your point about if it complies to code, that should be a moot point. But I can see, like, on the outset, what the concern would be.
Yeah, that big paycheck I don't get, yeah.
So yeah, I think we don't disagree with what you're saying up there. However, the draft code you have in front of you does still include the planning commission being involved in preliminary plat. So if it is your recommendation to remove that, we can definitely update it and get it before council in that version.
Dexter, welcome, by the way.
Thank you. It's good to
So
be
this
here.
is our city engineer, Dexter. You ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
Let's hit section 18.
Okay, so section 18, it's more of a technical section. So it has a lot to do with stormwater retention, engineering designing. So the sections of code that we updated in there, yeah. So we took out it used to have language in there that developers could apply that could exempt them from installing sidewalk. We have since removed that, so we don't have to do deferral agreements anymore. When a developer comes in, they have to do curb, gutter, and sidewalk, no matter what. So I think this just avoids future problems, and it just is a cleaner process. Do you want to scroll through the document, or do you want me to just give a highlight of kind of the?
Just highlight.
Yeah,
Okay.
highlights if you do.
Perfect. And so also we added some language that, we had some language in there that said the city engineer could determine things that happened with the sewer system. It's not our system, it's Central Davis and North Davis's system, so we have updated that, so we are not involved in that. We just say, go get their approval, get it back to us, and we'll say, okay, that's good, as long as we have a letter from them. And then another requirement that I mentioned earlier is that detention requirement. Typically, we had required the 10-year storm. We are gonna up that to the 100-year storm, just to keep our stormwater system functioning and it won't overwhelm us.
Dexter, is that a standard that's being used more generally around the state?
Yes, and I'll
Correct, and oftentimes 80% of plans that I see use the 100-year storm. I just don't correct them. I'm like, perfect, you're being more conservative than our code requires.
So
okay.
I'm doing a subdivision, I'm doing a plan down in Mojave County, and they just upgraded theirs 2 years ago to the 100-year. but they require on-site detention now. They used to let you discharge into their arroyos and stuff. Now it's all on-site detention, 100-year. They used to do 10-year and then I think 25-year. They had some varying, depending on the type, whether it was commercial or whether it was residential. And they've gone 100-year across the board for all types of development. And it looks like that's it looks like it's FEMA that's trying to get that standard so that they can try and get as much stormwater detention and ensure housing. I mean, that was kind of that was what their county engineer told us.
So another item in Chapter 18 is natural drainages. So we all know what happened up there at Orchard Ridge. So currently, we're having Bowen and Collins look through our code and update it to avoid those kind of things in the future. But as a step holder, because they're not done with that process, we're going to just put in there that they have to meet Davis County flood control requirements, which are robust enough that we feel comfortable having that little, like, we'll just have it for a few months or something before Bowen and Collins gets us the code update.
Will we see this back at that time for that change? Okay.
And that's pretty much all in 18 that I can remember. Oh,
Well,
never mind, this is in 18 as well, the irrigation. So currently our code says anything east of 89 can use culinary for irrigation purposes. We added this language just to give us some flexibility so we can evaluate development proposals and say, hey, is this too much of a burden on our system? Do they have to explore other options? So it's not as rigid as it once was. Okay.
I just watched the new meters going in front of my house today.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
That's
so
going to be interesting.
They're cruising. So
Yes,
it's a good
they
thing.
are.
So I think we can jump to Title 19 now. So this is the one that is very much driven by the state legislature. So like I said, currently the draft we have now is designating the Planning Commission as the administrative land use authority. So if it is your recommendation, we can modify that and make that city staff so that it wouldn't have to go to Planning Commission. And so part of that two-step administrative process, we have the preliminary plat and final plat. And so what Will said earlier is we could require one public meeting, but that's only for the preliminary plat. And we would have to meet our review deadline of 15 days to get that reviewed, to get it onto an agenda for Planning Commission. There is some confusion in state code of how it's written of that 15-day period. Is that 15 days for staff to review it, then they can recommend it to planning? Or is that 15 days that it has to go through the whole process and Planning Commission has to
Yeah,
make a recommendation?
I've talked to different several planners. The way that developers think it is 15 days from the day I drop it off to you versus till it's in a meeting.
Right. And that would be our concern is if you have a holiday or something's canceled, then you're 30 days out. So just making a staff level approval would avoid that problem.
There are cities that only have one planning commission meeting a month too.
So, and I'll say this, I mean, we are now at the point where we're about 300 acres left that's developable. I mean, I think we're not subdividing a whole, we're not like,
Not huge subdivisions.
no, we're not like Saratoga Springs was 20 years ago, but Saratoga's still subdividing huge pieces. I think, I mean, this makes a lot more sense to go almost administrative.
Yeah.
You know.
I agree. So, and the second part of that two-step process is the final plat. So this is a 20 business day review period from the time of a complete application. And during that review period, we are only allowed 4 review cycles. And part of the review cycle is once we've done the first red lines or the first set of comments, we are not allowed to add any additional comments that aren't for safety or for changes that the applicant have made or for state and federal code. So first review is very critical with this new code. And then also added an appeal process that if that time frame has expired or there hasn't been a consensus after the 4 review periods, that the city and the developer have to put together an appeal board that consists of an engineer that the city provides, like a consultant, an engineer that the developer provides, and then a third engineer that both parties agree upon. And then they split that cost 50-50. So that's very explicit in the state code that we have to include that process. And then another item we added was for retaining walls. So Andy Thompson put it pretty well. Back in the day, we were plains people, but with the annexations, we now have mountainsides that we have to deal with and retaining walls that come into play. So our code did not address retaining walls during subdivision process. So we've added this code that says the developer has to provide an engineer design, and then that engineer of record has to provide inspections and a report back to the city after installation that says the wall is constructed correctly and is safe. So it should have been there, and now it is. So, and then another item that's come up, and we've been doing this practice, but our code hasn't reflected it correctly, is developers are allowed to bond for infrastructure in order to record their plat. Our current code says they have to install everything before they can record a plat. That's against state code. So we updated that so they can do that and just made it more clear. And then I think that's all my highlights that I had on 18 and 19. If you guys have any questions or comments, we can listen to those now.
We did also want to discuss the,
protection strips.
the protection strips, which,
Grudge strips.
yeah, which I think are a terrible idea for a variety of reasons, but I didn't know if the experience of some of the commissioners might have some additional thoughts on that, but.
Don't buy land in Morgan County.
You what?
Don't buy land in Morgan County.
Okay. So, you know, really what ends up happening with those is it impedes road connections. It impedes connectivity that we want to see. I had a situation in Murray where I worked that it was actually ended up being, I think, a former city employee that found about this grudge strip, purchased it, and absolutely won't allow a connection into the neighboring property. And so then that puts the city in a position where if they do want to have a road connection, we'd have to go through eminent domain and condemnation. So, you know, there's, I think, a lot of negatives with those. I think maybe in the past they had a time and a place, not so much anymore, but I wondered if there was any thoughts on that. Dexter and I kind of had that same question.
I think, I mean, we discussed this, I think it's against state code. I thought state law said you can't restrict access to a person's property.
And we are recommending removing that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we went through this process with Meg Ryan and the land use, lands ombudsman in Morgan on a specific property in a subdivision, and they had to guarantee access to an agricultural piece behind, you know, and the developer was playing games with them because they're trying to force the sale of it. But they went to the state land ombudsman, and Meg was like, no, you can't do that. So they actually had to develop a road in there and allow them access on an easement. So I mean, I think there's some, but I think I know they changed the law recently on it.
I mean, you do have to have access, but the issue becomes where if you do have access to the property on one end, but you want to connect a road and that grudge strip is between the, you know, the road that exists and connecting into new development, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So the situation in Murray, there was other access. It just would prohibit a road connection that was identified in the master street plan that was supposed to be there.
Back in the day, when, you know, you had not a whole lot of development yet, and you had people that were developing land and probably ahead of some of the infrastructure. So then they would put in infrastructure that would obviously probably then be shared by other properties. But you wanted to assure the property owners, and the city wanted to assure that those other property owners would help pay for the cost when they get around to developing. And so that's why you had those protection strips that were used. And I mean, it had its place at the time, but now there's other ways to do that. and probably better ways to do that, because you just cited some of the abuses that can happen with that. So, yeah, it's probably a good idea to get rid of them. I think well, for one thing, we've got, the infrastructure's pretty much all over, at least in Kaysville. And then there are other ways to get that infrastructure paid for rather than by that kind of a method.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I think that's a good overview of the changes, and if you have any questions.
What would you guys, as staff, prefer in terms of bringing the preliminary plat to the planning commission, or no? What do you guys prefer?
Well, I'll speak to that, and then Dexter can chime in, and Dan as well, but my preference would be to handle it all administratively. In fact, was it Steve, did you send me that resignation letter from a planning commissioner?
Yeah, in Salt Lake City.
Planning commissioner, who expressed, part of the reason for her resignation was the frustration that she feels Salt Lake City in particular puts their residents through by allowing all of these comments on administrative items, and it leaves the public even more frustrated and mad than they were before they came. And I think that's the exact situation that we had with the Come and Go subdivision. That whole thing was the exact reason why you should not have these items come to a public body. The residents expect that they can influence the outcome when it's on an agenda, and when they can't have that influence, I think they end up leaving even more mad than when they came.
Apparently some council members too.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, I talked with Steve about this the other day, but I vividly remember Councilmember John Adams sitting in that meeting saying, it ticks me off that this is in front of us and we can't do anything about it.
Correct.
And so I would hope that experience would help the council to see the value in not putting the planning commission in that same situation. It's minimal, but it is more work for us to put it on an agenda, write a staff report. It will make your meetings longer. It'll make your nights longer. That's okay. If the council wants to do that way, that's what we'll do. But the preference would be to just hand it all administratively, because it is very technical. It is checking boxes, and when all those boxes are checked, it's approved. I do have concerns about timing on things. You know, we have one planning commission meeting in November. We had one in December. I think it's going to end up being an issue when cities put these subdivisions on planning commission agendas and it exceeds that 15 days for preliminary. I see that being a huge point of contention going forward between developers and cities, and I think that will probably end up getting changed anyway in the future. That would be my guess. But the other thing I wanted to comment about was I attended a meeting up at DTC 3 weeks ago now, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
And DTC was doing some things that neighbors around just didn't like. And so they opened up for the residents. It was just a neighborhood meeting. They opened up for residents to comment. And one of the ladies, I think she was on the second row, but she sat there and she said, look, don't waste our time. If we can't influence the outcome here, don't placate us. And that was also a very poignant moment to me to say, why are we putting these things in front of people for the sake of transparency when this is the transparent process, right? There was transparency up at the state legislature when they passed this bill. Most people don't pay attention, but there was one avenue for transparency. This public hearing, no one's here. This is the transparency. We're setting the laws. The transparency needs to happen with those legislative items, not with those administrative items. So my preference, and it's pretty strong preference, would be that we don't bring these forward. We streamline things. Most of the time when somebody comes and says, hey, what do we do about this? My answer is, what's the easiest thing? What's the simplest thing? And I think further complicating things is not a good process. I think it will be tricky to get the support of the council in this, but I think it's worth a shot. And my hope is that they would especially after this experience we had earlier this year with Come and Go, that they would see the value in just letting us do our jobs and not involving individuals that either don't have the expertise or really can't influence the outcome.
So, thank you. I'm going to open to a public hearing, which we have to have. Is there anybody here to speak to it? Ma'am?
Come on, Abby.
Okay. Since there's no comments, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, is there any other discussion we need to have on this item? What's the mood? What do you want to do?
I would recommend that, well, I would make the motion,
Okay.
if you're ready for that.
I am.
I would make a motion that we recommend to the city council approval of the changes to the subdivision code and the ordinances as have been presented to us, with the recommendation that the preliminary plat also be handled administratively by staff. And that would be it.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And we'll start the voting with Megan.
Aye.
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 That's unanimous. Thank you. I'll make just a further comment at the end of this. I noticed the other day that the Planning Commission in Salt Lake City has now lost enough members, they cannot meet. And they lost a really good Planning Commission member. She was the chair of the Ivory Boyer School of
Real Estate.
And when she resigned, 2 or 3 more Planning Commission members went with her because they had hoped to make some significant changes. I think if we can make some honest, good changes, not make change just to make change, I think there's some value in that. If we can help the citizens and help the city be more efficient, I think that's always, government's always inefficient. It was designed that way. I mean, there's a whole theory on why that is, and I agree with it. But this is one of those times when the process is transparent. I think this works for getting us there.
She made 2 big points. One was, of course, the administrative items, and that the Planning Commission was spending so much of their time on administrative items, which I worked at Salt Lake City for 6 years. I can double vouch that. They did spend a lot of time on that, and really, a Planning Commission, all of the items that a Planning Commission is tasked with doing in the state code are all legislative. When we do administrative items, we're not doing them as a planning commission, we're doing them as a land use authority. And a land use authority can be a lot of different things.
Yeah, it doesn't have
It can be the planning commission, yes, it can also be staff. It can be another body, it can be, that's not something that's exclusive to the planning commission, which says to me, the planning commission ought to be spending its time on planning issues, legislative related issues, rather than all of the administrative stuff. And so from that standpoint, the commissioner that resigned there, I agree with that. She also made another point about there not being experts on the planning commission, that they had to spend so much time explaining to people the basics of real estate and markets and land use and so on. I disagree with her strongly on that one. I think you do need a couple of experts but you also need a diversity of backgrounds. You get better decisions that way. And there's a lot of evidence for that. I cite a lot of that in some of the presentations that I did on group decision-making. So I disagree with her on that one, but the administrative stuff, yeah, I agree.
Okay, call the public. Public, we're calling you. As they used to say, I'd rather be governed by the first 100 names of the Boston phone book than who's there currently elected. But anyway, we'll move on. Other matters before the Planning Commission reports, correspondence, and calendar. Staff?
Happy holidays. We won't have another meeting until January. So
If anyone's interested, the Land Use Institute, Utah Land Use Institute is doing a Zoom workshop next Wednesday on moratorium.
Oh, okay. I'll send that out.
So it's free. You just have to go on the Utah Land Use Institute site and register.
A webinar?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay.
Do you know the time?
What's that?
Do you know what time?
10 o'clock in the morning, 10 till 12. And for those who can't join it, it'll be available on video afterwards.
If you register, will they automatically send you the link to the recording?
Yep.
Yeah, we'll send that out, and then if you're interested in watching that, then feel free. I've been through a few of those. It's an interesting process, and candidly, one that I think has been abused by a lot of cities, and so.
Yeah,
I think-
moratoriums
I
are
think
not
that-
well understood.
Yeah, and so a better understanding of that would be helpful. But I think that's it. We appreciate your time and hope you all have some very happy holidays.
So next meeting will be January the 8th?
No, that was.
11th.
No, it is the 8th, isn't it?
11th.
11th, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I'll be in Connecticut.
Okay.
Wolf won't be here.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Sure.